Today we're going to be talking about kind of creating a Pong game. So this is a very kind of simple version of a Pong game. You may know this from whenever you're talking to your parents or even your grandparents about one of the first video games they ever played. Pong is probably one of them. So in the last lesson we talked kind of about the layout of the Scratch interface, how we get sprites very basically moving. We're going to get several moving today. And we're going to actually have them so they can actually interact with each other. So the ones that we did last time were they were kind of independent of each other. They wouldn't actually interact ever. I don't know if you ever kind of ran into that whenever you were playing around with it, but hopefully that helps. One thing that we're always going to talk about whenever we're creating a new program or a new system is we're going to come up with a plan. This just helps us just kind of have a general idea of where we're going with our entire project. This is very common in industry of saying, hey, we're going to take a specific approach and we're going to take this specific approach and we're going to try and hit all of these things as we go along. There may be things that we don't think about and we can always come back and we can revise this plan, but it's always good to kind of lay everything out before we start building. It's kind of like, if you're actually building a house or something like that, you want to have the design before you start kind of laying the foundation. It just helps with making sure that everything gets built the way that you want it to. And the same thing applies to computer programming. So what we're going to do is we're going to develop a game based off of the old school Pong game. You may have seen this before. If you haven't, go look it up. It's pretty cool. What we're going to do is we're going to have our player use either a mouse or a keyboard, and we're going to decide that as we go along, to move a paddle to keep a ball from bouncing down and hitting the other side. This is going to be a one-player game. Scratch in two-player games this doesn't really work very well. So this will be a one-player game as we're going through this. What we want is we want the ball to start at the very top, and we want it so that because it's going to start coming down at the very beginning. We don't want our ball to accidentally be going just straight across and just bouncing back and forth at the very beginning. It's kind of a boring game. We want to make it kind of interesting. So what we're going to need to do that is we're going to have the ball point in a specific direction whenever it first starts. And we don't want it to always point in the same direction because that's also pretty boring. We want it to use what we call randomly generated number, or random number generation, RNG. But we're going to have the computer come up with some angle, and we're going to provide what numbers that we want to have it use. Whenever it hits the paddle, we want the ball to kind of turn around and start going back up. And we're going to give it, again, another random angle between negative 30 and 30. You could modify this as kind of an extension to make it so that it actually bounced instead of just randomly bouncing off. It would actually follow a specific pattern, if you will. I think this one, we want to use the mouse. The next thing that we do, I believe, is where we actually use the keyboard. Mouse is just a lot easier to code, really, to be honest. If the ball touches the bottom of the stage, then game over. That should be kind of, something that we all kind of, those of us that have at least played a basic game before, know, you need kind of a way to have game over. So, first thing that you're going to do, go ahead and delete the cat sprite. And this is kind of how we develop our plan. Then we're going to create a red border, and so this is going to be our out of bounds zone. We're going to make a paddle. We're going to get the paddle moving. Then we're going to make a ball move. Then we're going to release the ball so that it can start moving. We're going to have the ball move. Whenever it touches a wall or a ceiling, we're going to make it bounce. And then if it touches the paddle, we also want it to bounce. And then if it touches the red floor, we want the game to be over. So first things first, let's go ahead and delete Scratch. So the place that you can do that is in the upper right hand corner of your Scratch page. Also, if you haven't opened a new Scratch yet, go ahead and do that at this point in time, and then join us whenever you're ready. So go ahead and delete Scratch. We don't need them, so we can just delete them. Now what we can do is we can create a new border, and you can take two ways of doing this. You can actually make a sprite that just never moves, or you can make this a part of your actual screen. There's no true right or wrong way. Personally, I kind of like the backdrop idea, just because that way it's a part of the background and I can't accidentally delete that sprite and break my game. So create a red border, and the place that you do that is on, if you go over to the stage section of your screen, there it has the backdrops, and go ahead and select on backdrops 1. Once you've selected that, if you look in the upper left hand corner, you'll notice that the costumes tab has now changed to backdrops, and so you can actually go in and you can fix the backdrops or change the backdrops. Use your drop down arrow to select red. Don't have an outline, or if you do want an outline, it also needs to be red. It's going to be very important that we utilize this red system. Then make a rectangle shape and draw the rectangle at the bottom. Once you've done that, if you need a little more time to do that, go ahead and pause this. We're going to keep going on though. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go and create our paddle sprite. One doesn't necessarily exist for Scratch. You can make it happen that way, but it's just kind of nicer to do it like this because of the logic, the actual logic that we're going to provide to the program. So if you go back to that main code tab, in the very bottom right hand corner, you can see where Scratch was, where we just deleted Scratch from. There should be like a cat with a plus icon, unless they change it by the time after I make this video. There's a little cat with an icon. Go ahead and click on that, and then there should be a little paintbrush type thing that pops up, and that just says that you can actually create your own. Look for the crosshairs that are in the center. This is kind of the center of your actual sprite, and it actually is somewhat important that you're near-ish this whenever you're working with your object. The reason why is that's what everything is actually based off of. It's not based off of the rest of the sprite. It's based off of where that center point is. So just pay attention to that. Now draw something, like any type of rectangle, as long as it's not red. That's very important, that we cannot use red because it's going to freak out if we use red, just the way that we're programming this. So select the paddle sprite. Going back to the code section after you've kind of made this paddle, then rename the sprite to be paddle. This might seem unnecessary. However, it is very important that you name any variables, and for all intents and purposes, this sprite is actually an object, but you can think of it as being what's called a variable, something that we can change as the program is running. So go ahead and change that sprite name to be paddle. It can be lowercase, it can be uppercase. It doesn't make a huge difference. I say that, but there is instances where upper and lowercase do make a difference, but that's not here or there. So what we're going to do is we're going to now code our paddle. So pretty much all of our code is always going to start with when the green flag is clicked, and that's located under the events. Yeah, events. What we want it to do is we want the paddle to go to a specific spot, though we want it to actually go down. We don't want it being halfway. We want it slightly down, so that then whenever we start, our paddle is at the very bottom. So we're going to make it go to, and that's in the motion, 0, -130. And that -130 is going to bring it down, so we're there. Then go and find a forever loop and so go find the forever loop, put it in there, and put it underneath the go to x0, y, -130. Otherwise, it's going to forever be going to 0, -130. We don't want that. So go to forever. Now, go and find set x2, which is located in the motion category. And then you'll notice that this one is slightly off. Hopefully you can see this difference on your computer. This is a slightly different color of blue. It's actually located underneath sensing. So if you go on your left-hand side, there's a category column that says sensing. You're going to go ahead and you're going to go there and you're going to grab the one that says mouse X. And then you're going to put that right where there should be like a number. It might be 0, it might be something else. You can set that value right there. Click the green flag. Now try moving your mouse around. Does it work? And this little like what I just told you to do, the testing it is actually very, very important. Whenever you add something new, I always I think it's always a good practice to go in and make sure that what you just did didn't suddenly break, or that it's behaving in the way that you expected it to. It's a lot easier to fix it now than it is to come back and try and fix it. Also, if you haven't, add some comments onto here. Make it so that you can actually comment and know what's going on. Why is it doing it forever? Well, we want it to be constantly doing that. That's why. All right. So your next thing that you're going to do is you're going to go get a ball. And the way that you can do that is if you go again to that bottom right hand corner, there's the little cat icon with the plus. Click on that, and if you look in the library, there is circles or balls or stuff like that, so you can go find a ball. Again, I'd make sure it's not the same color of red, just because that's how it works. Now that you've gotten that ball, your screen should look something like mine, right over here, just like this. And that's okay. We're going to change some stuff up though. So what we're going to do is whenever we're, I guess I should clarify this. You need to make sure that you click on the sprite that you want to code in. So right now with the paddle, you should have this, when the green flag is clicked, go to 0, -130, forever, set X to mouse X. Okay, yeah. Then to edit things that are happening to the ball, we need to make sure that we click on the ball object itself, the ball sprite, so that then we can actually be working with it. All right, so first things first, let's go ahead and make the ball move. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go and get when the green flag is clicked, we're going to go grab a go to 0, 160, point in direction. Now this next one, it says pick random 135 to 225, and you're probably like, where's pick random? Pick random is underneath your operators. It's that color coded thing, but it's green. It's under the operators, and it says pick random. I don't think that it by default says 135, 225. I know it doesn't do that, but you can actually input those numbers kind of custom. And then we're going to, so those first two, that's your initialization. We talked about that, of what initialization is. Then we're going to go to forever. And once we're in forever, we're going to make it move 12 steps. And if it's on the edge, bounce. Now, this is a cool little feature that Scratch recently brought in. Before, we used to have the students actually have to code what bouncing looks like. But this actually works. So, forever, move 12 steps. If on edge, bounce. Make sure that's all inside that forever. We just talked about this. Yes. Yep, did all that. All right, now, go ahead and run this. No, seriously, go run this. Now, if you haven't run this yet, go run it. But you'll notice that the ball goes around and it bounces off the edge. That's awesome, right? But something isn't happening. It's not actually bouncing off the paddle. It's also, whenever it hits the red, it's not stopping. So what's going on? Your program is actually running exactly the way that we programmed it to. We never told it to bounce when it hits the paddle. We never told it that when it hits the red, it's game over. It doesn't know any better. It's just, okay, cool, there's just stuff on the screen, it doesn't matter. So it's a matter of, it's not that your program's broken, it's that we just haven't told it to do that. It doesn't know any better. You have to imagine this is like a little toddler. If like you give them a ball and like play with it, they don't know what to do. You're like, oh, this is how it works. So we got to go and provide, hey, this is how it works. Now, kind of one thing to talk about is who gets the code. And the way that I kind of think about it, and you might be like, what do you mean by that? Is it the paddle that gets the code of telling the ball to bounce off of it, or does the ball get the code to tell it to bounce off the paddle? And yeah, actually it is important to kind of distinguish between those two. The way that I always approach it, and I think a lot of people always approach it, is who's the one that's being changed. So in this case, the ball is the one that is being changed. It touched the paddle. It touched the out of bounds zone. So it's the one that has to make the change. So what we need to do is we need to provide how to test or how to check if it should bounce or not. So what we're going to use is what's called an if-then statement. it's a little bit, you can kind of get what that means whenever just from the name of it. But an if then statement says, if this is done, then do this. And we can have a more complex version of these, but we're just going to stick with if then. If this happens, do this. If this doesn't happen, just skip this. So we're going to do something, and if we do that, or if that condition is met, and this is a yes/no question, then we're going to do some piece of code. If it's not currently happening, we're going to skip that code, and we're just going to move on to the next thing. And that's where a lot of people struggle, is they're like, well, I have this if then, I do this if statement, but I always want this then to always run. No, that's not what that's for. If it's in a specific condition, then we're going to skip it. So what we're going to do is we're going to check if it's touching the paddle. And if it's touching the paddle, we're going to have the ball point in upward direction, somewhere between -30 and 30 degrees. And otherwise, it's just going to keep doing its thing. And even after it points in a direction, it's going to continue to do its thing. To see if something's touching, we actually can go into sensing and find touching. And it's like touching, and then there's like a drop down. So it might say mouse pointer, it might say edge, it could say paddle. So we want to grab the one that says paddle. And then we're going to put that inside of an if statement. The if, and then it has some like a hexagon. There we go. We're going to have that hexagon. Then it's going to go in some random direction between -30 and 30. And what that does is, remember, 0 is straight up, -30 and 30. And that might be inverted from what you're seeing on your computer, but close enough. So -30 kind of goes to the left. It goes counterclockwise, if you will. And then 30 goes clockwise. So at this point in time, and actually one thing that you probably didn't do is you probably built this, and that's fine. Where this needs to go is this needs to go inside of our forever loop, because we always needed to be checking this. And this is where something that I think a lot of students kind of mix up on is they want to try and put this if touching paddle then, and they want to put that above the forever loop. And what that will do is it'll actually prevent, it'll only run it one time, and then it'll do that forever loop forever. And a lot of students are like, but I have it in there. Well, yeah, you have it in there, and it ran it. It checked if it was touching the paddle one time, and it wasn't, so it didn't do anything. So you always want it in that forever loop. And they actually, sometimes, depending on how your program works, where that if, like where each statement is inside of the forever loop, can make a difference. So just things to be aware of. Last thing that we want to do is we also want an end. We want an end step. We want it to, test for the end of the game. Games are fun and all, but if you can never lose, then what's the real challenge? So what we're going to do is we're going to do a very basic test to see if it ends. So what we're going to do is we already set the floor to be red. So if the ball touches red, we want it to end the game. And we're going to have the code actually test for that. And you can see the code down below. So and then if you go back to that sensing, there's that touching color again. Or there's that touching area. So you can go find that's touching color, and you can go and grab that. If you click on the actual color, there will be a slider bar that pops up, and then also a little this little thing right here. You can click on that, and then you can click on any color you want. Make sure you click on the red, because we're going to put that inside of this if then. This stop all is located in the same area as the if then. It should say stop all by default. There is another option. We don't really ever use it though. Okay. And this helps make sure that you click on the right color red. Alright, so hopefully whenever you do this, you should be able to play your game. Make sure it bounces off your paddle once, make sure it bounces off the wall, and make sure that it ends. That's kind of the big things. And then, as always, you want to make sure that you comment. At this point, check with your teacher, see if your assignment's any different than what I do with my students. If it is, they'll let you know what that is. But for my students, this is going to be your task. So what you're going to do is you're going to have the ball change costumes, change colors, change its appearance each time it bounces off the paddle. Make a sound each time the ball bounces off the paddle. And as always, get your comments in. All right. Hope this is helpful.